Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Happy Monday.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We decided this. Coming up with topics is always an interesting thing. Because we want to make sure that whatever topics we come up with is the right stuff that you guys are looking for, and so we're going to let you guys speak today, and we're going to do a lot of Q&A today. Hopefully, there's a lot of things going on that you guys that we can help maybe fine-tune some things. But I know last week we covered a lot of the Clover stuff, and we've had quite a bit of Clover stuff going on. And I'm glad Brian's here because I didn't tell him, but I'm gonna ask him to share his Clover story. I'm going to call on you, but Clover is becoming a bigger piece of what we do, obviously. It does a lot of other things besides just process credit card transactions. So I want to go through a couple case studies today of what we did with Clover. I'm going to have Chad talk about a liquor store that we did. And I'm going to have Brian. He's got a lot of Clover stuff going on. He's gone like gangbusters on it. And I think we're even working on getting that demo unit for you to take with you. But so what I want to do is let's talk Clover again. Then we're going to open it up. Next week's going to be a really great call. We have a new merchant tune-up sheet that is going to help you guys when you get out in front of a merchant. What do I ask them? A little more in-depth questions about their processes. It's a great educational piece for our advisors too. So make sure you come for next Monday, and we'll have it. We'll email the sheet out so everybody has it when they come to the call. But Chad, are you here?
I'm here.
All right, let's do that. Let's talk about, we came up with a liquor store and, kind of tell it from the beginning, and I think when we first approached the liquor store that we really hadn't thought Clover yet. Is a relatively new advisor with us. So, talk about that story and how that unfold.
Okay. Really simple. So we got statements on a liquor store. They're, the basics are they're running, 55 to 60 grand a month. Through on processing, they're on an enhanced recovery deal, so there's plenty of room in the account. A big hang up for them is they spent $1,400 on a cash register system, and they're running all the transactions through a terminal. One of the guys' biggest beefs is, and if you know anything about the liquor store business, you have to put your orders in each week with your liquor distributors to make sure that you've got the inventory in on hand. And so right now he's been manually having to go through and count what's on the shelves to figure out what he needs to order each week. And taking a look at the statements, what we're finding is we can definitely save him a good chunk of money and still keep about $150 profit in the account each month. Relatively easy, and the biggest thing for him is what he's going to save in time. It takes him a couple hours each week to go through his store with his clipboard count. Okay, how many bottles of vodka do I have? How many bottles of tequila do I have? How much Budweiser do I have on hand? By getting that inventory system in there with the Clover, he's automatically, when it comes time to order each week, he's going to be able to see what went through the till and go, okay, well, we had, 200 cases of Budweiser go out. We had 25 bottles of Grey Goose go out. Whatever it is that he's having to reorder, he can do it right from home if he wants to just hop on his computer and see what ran through the liquor store.
Well, and this guy was kind of fighting it too because he'd spent $1,400 on this cash register. Was it $1,400?
Yeah.
Wasn't it $1,400 he paid for? This was the cash register that he purchased prior to hearing about this. And this, all it does, from what I understand of the deal, all it does is it's just a cash register. That's it. I mean, there's no inventory management. There's no time clock stuff. There's nothing. And then he's doing, he's going old-fashioned. He's going and counting bottles every night or every week or however, or two hours a week. He's doing his inventory. So what we're able to do is go in and show him, look, there's 8 hours a month, basically a full day through the course of the month where you spend on inventory. Just doing inventory. Here we can have it done, once we put the SKUs in, what the inventory is. That'll be the last time you have to do it is next time you do it with the clipboard because it'll all be in your system. And, what do you think that saves a merchant? that's a huge savings to a merchant. I mean, imagine being able to free up 8 hours of your time and not having to do inventory, but you can just do it in the matter of, well, I don't know how long it'd take him to do on the Clover system, 20 minutes, a half hour to put his order together. So
Yeah,
that was
huge.
Yeah. And what did he? Is that all? That was his big selling feature, was the inventory system.
Yeah.
Because he did balk a little bit when he goes, I already got a POS system. I don't want a new one. This one's a great cash register. This does this. This does that. But it doesn't do what saves and makes him money. So there's a great example of using inventory management, and that's a great target. Because anything like that is certainly a great target. Thanks, Chad. I appreciate that. And Brian.
Yes.
Brian, you've been on a Clover rampage, I would say. Is that fair to say? Something like that?
We're working on it.
You're working on it. Well, share some of your, if you would. And I appreciate it. I know we talked a few times last week about it. Tell me what's developed for you in the Clover arena since our call last Monday.
It was almost by accident. I had a merchant call me wanting to know what it was going to take to get out of their agreement with us, because they wanted to buy a new POS, and they were already talking to somebody else, and somebody else was pitching a tablet-based point-of-sale system, which is basically an iPad, and then you get your iPad, and then you order a kit that and try and convert it into a point-of-sale system, where the Clover is an out-of-the-box thing ready to go that is designed to be a point-of-sale system from the beginning. The tablet doesn't do anything but the point-of-sale stuff. So when I heard they were shopping for one, I went over and showed them the difference between what they were looking at and what we had to offer, and sold one. And then a few days later, I stopped at a coffee shop that we have, because I always try to spend money, where people spend money with me. And she asked me, she says, well, I'm thinking about a point-of-sale system. Do you guys do that? And it was almost like magic. It's like, well, yeah, we do. We just kind of stepped into it, and it's working quite well. And so I decided to kind of look back at all the different accounts that I have, that could use something like that, and it's dozens of them can use one.
Brian, what kind of accounts can really benefit from that?
Well, I would say anything, small restaurant, coffee shop stuff, even some of your larger restaurants, nothing huge in the restaurant business, because that takes a little bit different type of a system. But then you have anybody that has an inventory issue, retail stuff. You could do stuff with beauty shops with it. Pretty much everything, almost everything. Unless it's what I call a micro merchant, somebody that really doesn't take a lot of cards. If they're taking a lot of cards, they're doing a lot of business, and they need a way to manage it.
Thanks.
You bet.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, I had my phone on mute. I had to cough up a lung.
Still?
Excuse me, I'm running with one less lung, so I apologize.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
So what do you think the volume breakdown is? And you and Chad, have a pretty good idea about this too. I mean, obviously, if we go to, a $2,000 or $3,000 a month merchant, the Clover's going to be a lot for them. I think dollars and cents wise. And I guess, do you break it down on a volume issue, or how do you break it down when you approach a merchant?
The rule of thumb I've been going with is once they're at that $10,000 level or higher, you do start getting enough return, and like the golf course that we just put 2 Clover units in. It's seasonal, but they stay open for lunch and stuff at the bar and restaurant year round. And so even in their off season, they're running 8,000 to 10,000 through. And then come high season, when they're full of golfers, that restaurant and bar, they were running on old paper tickets, and so the server would take the order, and they'd have to tell the bartender, hey, I need 2 drinks, and then they'd run the ticket to the kitchen. Just in their systems and how they run and their order taking process,
Right.
it'll pay for itself real quickly in that scenario.
Well, I suppose the quicker you get the drinks to the table, the quicker they're reordering. So
This is true.
you know, I went to a place this weekend and had dinner, and it was a bigger restaurant, so Clover wouldn't be a good target. But I remember looking at the bartenders, and you know, their little printer just kept printing out these drink tickets. You know, and they'd pull the drink ticket off, they'd make the drinks, they'd put them on the corner of the bar, and then they'd lay that drink ticket next to the drinks, and then I'd see the servers come over, and the servers would look at the ticket next to the drinks and go, "Yep, this is my order." And I mean, it was just so efficient. And I think now with this Clover system, you can help those guys that do the 10, 15, 20,000 a month, the smaller restaurants, have those same efficiencies. And you know, obviously more efficient, the more revenue they're going to do. You know, get the drinks to the table quicker. People are going to reorder. Yeah, you know, they're going to have more cocktails. They're going to spend more money. And those are the things that I think when you're selling this Clover, I think these are things that, you know, they're almost like, you know, how do you quantify that to a merchant? How do you build up with a merchant so they understand? Because what merchants tend to do, and I think we all do this, you know, you guys have all heard the expression, it takes money to make money, right? Obviously. It takes money to make money. You got to spend money to make it. And when a merchant goes, oh, the Clover cost me X and it cost me X amount to run, you know, I think we got to ask them the right questions to show them. Go, look, what if each person, each one of your servers, were even 5% more efficient for the month? You know, and they can break it down. What's that?
Or you needed one less.
Or you need one less.
With less help, you can, and really for what the Clover costs, what, you know, $1,500 to $2,000 kind of a thing to get off the ground, that's cheap compared to almost everything else out there.
Right. Yeah, that is tremendously cheap.
And for anything else in this price range, it does 3 times the functions. So it's if once you understand a little bit about what it does, it's not too hard to go head to head with any of these. You know, buy an iPad, build your own point of sale system setups,
right?
And they're going to have the same money in one of those, and those are nowhere near a Clover.
And the golf course we just did, they did it on a lease, so they're at $159.95 a month, 2 Clover units, 2, you know, a bar printer, kitchen printer. Their lease score came back as an A, so the agent's making about $1,200 with the conversion bonus. But they're looking at it as the other systems they were looking at were starting out at the $5,000-$6,000 ballpark. And you know, if you go to turn around and go, oh, I have to put this much money out, and they're in their low season, so they decided rather than a big cash outlay, hey, let's finance it, and you know, $160 a month, and they've got a state-of-the-art system that does everything they want it to, plus they can you know, continue to build on it and do. A big thing for them is a loyalty program. So when people come for lunch, they're going to want to start, you know, getting rid of the punch cards and going to like the PERCA system where they can draw people in and run specials.
Okay. Interesting. Good.
Well, and that's what they wanted. They need something like that because in the off season, they need to be able to pull business into them when people aren't coming out to golf.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, because that's what keeps them afloat is the restaurant bar in the winter months. So, excuse me. Good stuff. Good stuff. Does anybody else have any? Let me ask: Is anyone else? Are you out there talking about Clover?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What type of marketing material do you suggest? Just print the 6-page
what is,
PDF we have?
Go ahead, Chad. Sorry.
I think really, you know, the stuff that we've got on the site is good. What's more important than that is the questions that you ask them to find out if they're a good candidate or not. And those questions really are in getting into their business process and how they do business. So it may be, it's how are you tracking your inventory now? How do you manage your employee schedules? If you're talking with a salon, how do you, if you've got 5 stylists or 10 stylists, how do you manage their appointments right now? These are all things that Clover can do, and so rather than going out and just, hey, here's a Clover system, here's the brochure on it, I think you really have to find that need in there. Find what's a painful subject for them. If managing their employees, and when they clock in and doing the schedules for them, if that's a difficult thing for them, hey, perfect. Let's show how we can do that through a Clover. If it's managing their inventory or doing their books, all right, that's the angle where we're going to want to. What we need to do is create value with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I wouldn't rely on, I think collateral material is, it's great if you use it right. I think what happens is more and more people, they'll go and they'll lay out the collateral material in front of them, tell them how much it is, and then try to build value, which is backwards. And I think what Chad was kind of getting at too is that, if you ask these questions, like, what do you do for, just out of curiosity, you make it conversational, obviously. What are you doing for inventory management? I mean, how does your time card system work? How do you keep track of appointments? How do you do your loyalty programs? And you're asking them questions like that, and they go, oh, well, we have, a whole separate system. We do inventory. We do it once a week. I just run around with a clipboard. And then, then in proper sales technique, if they go, oh, I just run around with the clipboard, and they go, wow, that sounds time consuming. This is how I go. And they go, well, it's not so bad. I only spend like 2 hours a week doing it. Oh, okay, so 2 hours. So, okay, so what you're saying is like 8 hours a month then? So like you lose 1 day a month doing inventory? And they go, well, yeah. And I go, wouldn't it be, let me ask you, I mean, if I could show you a way to, we could do that inventory in 20 minutes, would that help you? Well, yeah. I mean, 8 hours to 20 minutes, of course. And go, okay. And then I would go on and ask them more questions. Well, okay, well, let me ask you, what do you do for, your order tracking or employee time clock, or do you have any loyalty card programs or anything like that? No, we didn't do gift card because we didn't want to spend $1 a card. Oh, okay. So if you could do something electronic that they could put right on their phone, that'd make it a lot easier for you, then a lot less expensive, right? Because think about that. If you don't have to do a plastic card, I mean, you're saving on that investment right there. Mm-hmm. Because how many merchants have bought, they'll go out and they get all excited to buy 1,000 cards, and then their people aren't selling them. You know what I mean? So, this way with the system, you can promote it, market it, and it actually saves you money. So, good questions. And somebody else had a question too. Somebody else was saying something.
I had a question, but it wasn't about this. It was about what is a reasonable lease payment on this particular piece of equipment now, if you're going to lease it. $100 a month?
That really depends, because there's so many different components that you can put into it. When you start adding scales or kitchen printers, things like that, the costs really go up. So it really varies, and I'd say case by case.
But let's say a standalone unit, nothing fancy, just the standard unit. No extra printers, no extra scanners, no scales, nothing, just a standard unit.
On the low end, we've.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Low end, we've done 2 or 3 of them between that $75 and $85 range in the last 2 or 3 weeks or last month.
And that's certainly a low end. You get and what I always do anytime you lease, kind of as you're going through the process and you're talking about, one of the questions I always ask, because I'm always anticipating presenting the lease, And I always ask the merchant, I go, and let me ask you, I mean, so you're the only owner, right? And they go, yeah. And they go, oh, okay, how's credit of ownership? And they go, what do you mean? And they go, well, you're the only owner, right? And they go, yeah. And they go, well, how's your credit? I ask it like that, how's credit of ownership, instead of going, well, how's your credit? Because it's kind of like brash and offensive. So I go, well, let me ask you, how's credit of ownership? And they go, what do you mean? They go, well, you're the only owner, right? And they go, yeah. And they go, well, how's your credit? And they go, well, I've had a few hiccups along the way. I wouldn't go in at $79.95. I'd go in at $99.95 on a low end. Or I'd go in at, $149. And I'd rather lower the payment by giving them a deal than having to ask for more because their credit rating comes in kind of poor. So I always ask, how's credit of ownership? So if I ask that way, and plus, keep in mind when you're presenting this lease, if you're talking to a guy, and we talk a lot about the inventory management piece because that's an easy one. That's an easy one for people to relate to. And you got a guy who goes, oh man, if I could pick up another day a month and not have to do inventory, shit, that'd make me hundreds of dollars. Ah, okay. And, they're not going to say it like that. Obviously, they're going to go, oh God, that would really, really help me in my time. Then I'm going to go in at $149.95. If he's going, yeah, I guess that'd help me a little bit, and he's not giving me a real good buying signal or whatever, I may come in at, $119. So I want to kind of play it. Hopefully I can build enough value where they'll see coming in at $149. Then you're making a real pretty penny if they have good credit at $149. And you know what? The value's there. The value's there for them, so you can go in with good conscience, knowing, man, I've really helped this guy be a lot more efficient.
Chad, Chuck,
yeah.
Other than the inventory and the work scheduling and doing the books and appointments and loyalty programs, what other things or what other apps will this particular piece of hardware do?
Well, I know what they say, Chad. There's like 150 apps in development right now.
Right, and the best source for that, if you go to www.clover.com or helpclover.com, you can go in and you can go right into the app market and you can see basically everything that's already out there. In fact, with this liquor store, we were just working on, a big thing was being able to import his inventory. They've even got an app for that allows you to, from a spreadsheet, upload everything right into your unit. So if you do a big changeover, and it's basically, I think it's like a $1 per download, so you can upload into the system and then you pay $1 and you can download your entire inventory. There's things that I didn't even know existed when we started running through it to do that deal.
Right.
Yeah, and another.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. Sorry, I was coughing. Anyway, another big selling point is the fact that it will integrate with QuickBooks, which that's a big thing because a lot of your small businesses use QuickBooks, because face it, it's a good product. Right. Other than their merchant services side, which isn't quite as good as ours by any means. But yeah, they can run their business and, end of the day, end of the week, whatever, hit the button and it all shoots right into their bookkeeping system.
Yeah, that's a great way to get around. We've all run into these merchants that are using QuickBooks and they don't want to use the additional piece that we need to get it to work. So, this way you're basically upgrading their whole system. And what I would do too is I would look to see, and I haven't done this for a while, but since we started using Clover, but I would get out there and see what apps are coming down the pike. What's in development, what's coming, have a good understanding of those, understanding enough, because the beautiful part about these open source apps is they're written by other people. They just get certified with the Clover system. And what I mean by that is, let's take lodging for an example. You have a company that writes an app because they're from the lodging world, so they write an app of everything these anybody in the lodging industry would want, and then they get it certified with Clover. So it's actually getting written by people who know what these industry types are looking for. they're people who come from that industry. So either the apps are better, and plus you want to promote the heck out of the apps because that's an additional revenue stream for you. If every time, if it costs them $1 to download, we're going to get a percentage of that. I don't know what it is. It depends on the app. But you know what? If that's working in the background for you and every one of your Clover clients is downloading an app, maybe you'll see an app that pertains to them. You shoot them an email and go, hey, there's a new app for Clover that's lodging, or it's for, running your, trivia at your bar or whatever you're doing. You want them to buy the apps. And the more they're engrossed in the apps, the less likely they are to ever leave you because it's too convoluted then. They're running 4 or 5 different apps through their Clover system that they're using at their business. They can't replace that. And by the learning curve to replace that, it wouldn't make dollars and cents for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think anytime you can add a little extra income to your merchant, and help them grow, hey, that's a win-win scenario. So it's a great question. Any other questions, or what else is going on, you guys? And even if you have now at this point, I think if you have any bottlenecks that you're running in with, whatever you're struggling with, you're probably not the only person on this call that's struggling with it. And this is a great format. We got great resources. Brian, Clover stuff or anything else. I know Cam's written an absolute heck of a lot of business. There's other guys here that have written a ton of business. So now's the time, especially if you're new, if you're running into things, air it now. Ask the question, and you've got great resources to pull from right here on the call. So what else are we running into out there?
Oh, come on.
It's Mark.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, does anybody go against, I know I've been against it before a few times, but the squared thing, what's a number, does anybody know the number where it's worthwhile? Is it like $5,000 or $3,000 a month? Or there's a number that makes sense. Does anybody have that number, what number they use?
2,000.
Well, usually, 2,000 is kind of the number that I've always run with. If they're doing $2,000 or less, unless they really want their own program. What you got to, and this might lose some folks if you're not real math savvy, but let's just talk about average ticket. I had a merchant the other day that was selling, I think it was like lemonade or something, and their average ticket was $10. Well, Chad, what would you say our effective rate would be on a really, let's say a basic standard 20 basis point cheap deal on a small ticket? What would be our cost? Just shooting from the hip, you figure that'd be a small ticket transaction. It's under 15 at 20 basis points with the average ticket. What's that going to cost us?
Your cost, say that it's regulated debit, which a lot of the coffee shop, lemonade stand, small tickets are.
Right.
Our hard cost runs somewhere around 32 cents, depending on where that ticket falls.
All right, so let's say it's 31 cents is what it cost us to run that $10 ticket. And Square will run a program at 2.75, so it's going to cost the merchant 27.5 cents. So with a deal like that, small ticket, let Square have them. And people, I know the natural question would be, and if I were on this call and relatively new to the industry, I'd go, well, how does Square do it? Well, if you've read anything about Square, they're losing money. And also, I think what's going to happen in that arena with Square is that, they attract a lot of merchants because there's no statement cost, there's no PCI cost, there's no IRS reporting cost. You just pay as you go. But you pay a higher rate. If on the other side of that, if you take a merchant with a $100 average ticket, they're going to pay $2.75, where we can get that ticket done for less than $2, or less than $2. Well, regulated even less than that. So you got to look at the average ticket. So the
I got you. The PayPal's come up with a 1.2 now, but they're 2.95. PayPal's got one. But Yeah, this one's a laundry. This is a service that handles laundry for hotels and places like that. And I think their average ticket is more like 50 or 60. So this would definitely work. But he wasn't running that much business, so his the statements, costs, and regulatory product and all that, if you added it up, when you're doing a little bit of business, obviously that affects it. But no, this is definitely worth it for him. I think I'm going to write it next week. But I just wanted to know if anybody had 2,000. I don't know. I guess I had it a little bit higher than that. But I was just curious as to what people thought about that. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because other people are running into it. I first go, how much volume do they do? And they go, well, I do 800 a month. I go, hey, you should just stick with Square. Stay there. You know what I mean? If they go, well, I do 2,800, I go, and the next question I ask is, what's your average ticket? And then once I know those two things, you can, because then it really boils down to a numbers thing. What's the number? So I think that's a great, legitimate question. So.
Chuck, what is going to happen with the Square with all the new compliancy coming? Because obviously there's no punch-in keypad with that.
Yeah, that I don't know. I think, Square, I don't know if they're going to come out with, I know FDR.
I can chime in on that if you want me to.
Yeah,
they have an EMV thing already that's come out. They have an EMV. They can you can actually do the EMV off the Square. They have an apparatus right now. I saw it online.
Okay.
So you have to pay for that. It's not free like the other. I think it's $39 or something like that. But they do have a EMV chip reader that's attached to the phone. So they do have that.
And an EMV is going to obviously change PCI a little bit. So, because it's pin based now. So it'll be real interesting to see what transpires with that. I know FDR's got a new. And I don't know if it's out yet. Chad may know better than I, but if they have that, the attachment now has the chip reader on it through FDR. So those mobile units.
I know it's coming.
I know it's coming. Those mobile providers are, they're becoming, they got to be chip and pin, So they're coming up with something.
So Chuck, you think the cost will go down then? The overall PCI compliance things will go down or no?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, that's that's Visa and Master. But you think about it. If you think how much fraud, the chip and pin should eliminate so much fraud. I mean, fraud's non-existent in Europe because they're all chip and pin. So it'll be real interesting to see what happens, because that's coming out in October, right? So I'd be really interested to see what happens, because not all merchants are going to be chip and pin ready by October, and they're absolutely crazy if they're not, because they're opening themselves up to be a huge target. Because if a merchant's not chip and pin ready, then the merchant assumes 100% liability then. So even if the merchant is PCI compliant, but they're not chip and pin, they have 100% liability. The way it works now, if they're PCI compliant, the merchant doesn't have the liability. But if they're not chip and pin, they will have the liability. So someone comes in, steals a bunch of credit card numbers, and racks up $100,000 worth of fines and chargebacks and things of that nature. That all lies on the merchant. And I don't know about you guys, but how many people can handle, let's say a $50,000 hit? How does a merchant recover from that? Especially when they do, their total volume is $10,000-15,000 a month, because they don't want to spend the money to be chip and pin compatible. They don't want to spend the extra, $400 or $500 for a terminal, or the extra $39.95 a month. Well, what's going to happen when you get a $50,000 hit because you're not compliant? Which is better? Do you have car insurance? Why? Do you plan on getting in an accident tonight? Well, no. Do you have life insurance? Yeah. Do you plan on dying tonight? No. Well, why do you have it? Just in case? Okay. Well, then you need to be chip and pin, just in case. I think you got to relate it for them.
What happens if people key in numbers? They take an order over the phone, and it happens to be a fraudulent credit card.
They need to be PCI compliant, number one.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the thing. A lot of these merchants, like for example, my attorney, the way she takes cards is I call on the phone and I give them my credit card number. And what she does is she keys it into to a credit card terminal. Well, she doesn't need a chip and pin terminal because she never swipes it. It's 100% keyed. So you're going to have merchants that aren't going to get a chip and pin terminal, but they never swipe anything. But you better make sure they're PCI compliant, though.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, good question.
Well, I mean, the additional things with that is there are security features that we download right onto the terminals, like the CVV, so that 3-digit from the back of the card, because a thief won't have that 3-digit card unless they're holding on to the card itself.
Right.
You know, address verification. There are other measures to prevent it.
Right. And they should be doing those already. I mean, those should already be in place. If a merchant's doing keyed business, you know, if they're a retailer that takes a card, because some retailers will take an order over the phone. Hey, I was in there last week. Can you hold this coat for me? Well, if you pay for it, I'll hold it. Oh, can I give you my credit card number? You're going to have some of that. Of course, you know, they're not going to come in and pick up a jacket with a stolen credit card, but they might try to talk the merchant into shipping it to them. So they should have that built into their system already. If they don't, they're way behind the curve.
I have a question about the global gateway. If there's any plans for FDR to have a PIN pad that can accept the EMV somewhere down the line soon.
With the gateway? Like if they want to run something on their PC?
Yeah, a lot of the medical attorneys and some of the other industries, they like, you know, logging into the gateway and swiping and not having the actual equipment on their countertop. It's an image thing. So
no, I get it.
The global gateway, is FDR planning on having a PIN pad that will accept EMV that attaches to it sometime soon?
Well, you know, I think more is probably the card reader piece. And I know with systems like that now, I don't even think those card readers come from FDR. They come from third-party companies. Like when you have when you have like a computer system and then you want to run the gateway so you get a card reader. You know, and I don't know, I guess that'll be a supply and demand kind of thing. I'm sure at some point they will. And I'm sure these card reader companies, they're on that already anyway, I'd imagine. You know, because
so how does the PCI or the EMV, how does that all play in on all these medicals that have swipers, and currently there's nothing available to attach an EMV reader of any kind? How is that going to affect them?
Well, it certainly is going to open them up for liabilities if it's not available to them, and time will tell. I mean, we don't know. You know, the people who manufacture the card readers now are the ones that are going to come up with something like that, because FDR doesn't have FDR doesn't sell a card swiper to go again with your computer now, as far as I know.
No, they don't. Those all come from somebody else.
All come from third party. So if that's the business they're in, I would imagine they're going to come up with something.
Okay.
Yeah. Someone else was asking a question?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
What actually is the chip and pin?
Well, if you look at your credit card, the chip and pin, when you look at the new cards that are coming out, oddly enough, everybody and their brother has a card with a chip in it. I don't have one yet. I've been told I'm getting one. But it'll have a little computer chip inside the card. That's where the information's read from, is you just insert that part of the card into the terminal or the card reader, and then you need a PIN, like a 4-digit PIN, like you would on your debit card, to run a credit card transaction. Where now, you just go and they swipe it, and then they print out a receipt for you to sign. This will be, they enter the card into the terminal, then you key your 4-digit PIN to run the transaction. If you don't have the PIN, I guess that's up to the merchant to decide what they want to do from there.
Okay, is that actually going to be something that's going to come out on debit cards as well?
I think it's coming out on any branded card. So anything with a Visa or MasterCard logo on it will have the American Express too. Discover too, Chad? I don't remember.
All cards.
Yeah,
All cards.
All card, yeah.
all
All
cards will
cards
have.
will be chip and pin.
Right now too, it's not necessarily gonna, the jury's still out, but as far as the PIN number being put in, right now in Europe they do it, you put the chip in and you get a signature. And so starting out, that's most likely what all the issuers here will do. At some point they may go to requiring a PIN pad. But the biggest thing is being able to read the chip.
That's the big piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Good question. All right. Any other questions, guys?
I've got another question.
Yeah, this is Marty. I'm still really new to this, and a lot of this stuff is completely new to me, and I'm just wondering what would be a good place on the internet that I can go to learn more about the Clover system and just learn everything about this whole system. That way, I just learn a whole lot on the internet and train on it.
No,
so I can
I hear you. No problem. Who do you work with here, Marty?
It's John.
John, what I would do is get with John and have him, we have a lot of information available to you, and then let him walk you through some things, and then he can kind of, you can strategize with you about the Clover and get you the right information.
All right.
Yeah,
all right.
Definitely work with John.
All right.
Thank you, sir. And someone else said they had one more question.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Is there a flyer that you can actually print out? Kind of like an introductory when you get to a business that you're cold calling on, just to leave it behind, or just you think it'd be best just to leave a business card behind?
Well, I think there you should get with your agent director and decide what your strategy is going to be. We're not big cold callers here. We're not big fans of cold calling. We'd rather go about it just a tad bit more strategically. And depending on what you're going in with and what you're talking about is certainly going to determine if you need to leave behind or what kind of collateral material you need. So what I would do there again is get with your agent director and go, look, let's strategy. It's all about strategy in this deal. And what I would seriously recommend for everyone is don't go down to the local strip mall and just go door to door. That's a hard life in this business. I think if we go about it a little bit differently and follow a different model, you're going to find that your success rate per contact is going to be much higher, and just the emotional toll on you will be a lot easier. And then decide which pony you want to ride in on. What's your? Do you want to have something that is kind of your? We're real consultative in the way that we sell, so we like to go in and do our discovery. And I think when you come next week, you'll see that we have a merchant tune-up sheet. We want to tune these merchants up. We want them to run as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So we're introducing a tune-up sheet next week that will be a real good guide to help you when you're in front of that merchant, making sure you're asking the right questions, making the right recommendations for them to really streamline their operation. So make sure you come next week, and we'll email that out with the call invite. We'll try to attach that to the call invite email, and we're going to go through it on the call, and we'll tell you why we ask these things, what do they mean. A lot of these seasoned guys will be able to chime in and go, man, this is what works really well for me because they're using it already. They just have done it enough. They use it already. So I would make sure you come next week for sure.
Okay.
All right. Great question. All right. Any other questions, guys, before we part ways today? We're good? All right.
What
awesome.
about big merchants?
What about big merchants?
How big is too big?
That's an interesting question. It really depends on the nature of the business. Obviously we're not going to go to Walmart. We're not going to go to, Target, Best. Those big corporate deals, they're big enough. They do enough transactions. They actually are their very own ISO. They're big enough, so we're not going to get into things like that. We've done merchants to do literally millions of dollars a month, but it depends on what type of deal it is. And I know that's not a very cut and dry answer. I would just stay out of the big box stores. How's that? because you'll never get anywhere with that.
Okay.
All right, good question. All right, cool. You know what, guys, really appreciate it. We're heading to, we're rapidly approaching the end of the month, so now's the time to, we've got a few days left to get your numbers on, and you certainly don't want to go a month without writing business. It's actually harder to write one deal a month than actually write 5. And what I mean by that is if you're doing it, you're working the model, and you're building your machine, and you're doing it exactly the way we talk about doing it, you build a deal flow. If you're just kind of scrambling around going, I just got to get my one deal a month, and scrambling, that's a hard way to go about this. So get with your agent director, go, look, how do I build my machine to yield me 4, 5, 10 deals on a monthly basis? That makes your life a lot easier in this deal. So we're reaching towards the end of the month. Let's get out there. Let's get our stuff on. And next week, definitely come. We're merchant tune-up next week, which will be a lot of fun. So thanks all for coming, and we'll see you next Monday.